There is a distinct, suffocating tragedy in realizing that the person you sacrificed your dreams for views your devotion not as love, but as a highly exploitable political asset. For the last 5 years, I put my career on hold, folded my ambitions into a neat little box, and poured every ounce of my energy into being the steadfast foundation my wife needed to build her political empire. She ran on a platform of family values, promising transparency, loyalty, and moral integrity to the voters of our state. To the outside world, she was a flawless public servant, and I was her adoring, supportive husband. But she made one fatal miscalculation in her arrogant climb to power. She forgot that the man she forced to stand silently in the background, smiling for the cameras while she betrayed everything our family stood for, was also the man running the audiovisual cables. She thought her power made her untouchable, oblivious to the fact that I was already holding the match that would burn her entire campaign to the ground on live television. My name is Jack Davis. Before the campaign buses, the endless fundraising galas, and the suffocating spin rooms, I was an architect. I ran a small but thriving firm downtown, specializing in sustainable residential design. I loved my work, but when our daughter, Emma, was born 4 years ago, my wife's political career was just beginning its meteoric rise. Rachel was charismatic, fiercely intelligent, and possessed a relentless hunger for public office. We made a choice, or rather, I made a concession. She couldn't kiss babies and shake hands across the state while managing a newborn, so I stepped back. I moved my drafting table into the spare bedroom, drastically cut down my client list, and became a stay-at-home dad. Emma became my entire world, and I happily embraced the role, believing I was lifting my wife toward her dreams. Rachel's current ambition was a highly contested seat in the state Senate. Her campaign was a well-oiled, aggressively funded machine. If you drove through any neighborhood in our district, you couldn't go 3 blocks without seeing her face printed on glossy, red, white, and blue yard signs. Rachel Davis, restoring family values. Her speeches were perfectly crafted masterpieces of political theater. She spoke passionately about the sanctity of the home, the importance of absolute transparency in leadership, and the moral integrity required to guide our community into the future. The voters ate it up. They saw a brilliant, fiercely dedicated mother and wife who wanted to clean up the corrupt Capitol. But the reality behind the heavy oak doors of our home was a freezing, sterile wasteland. The absolute second the cameras stopped flashing and the donors hung up the phone, the warm, compassionate candidate completely vanished. Rachel didn't walk into our house, she occupied it. She would sweep through the front door, her eyes glued to her smartphone, obsessively refreshing the latest polling data or scrolling through her opponent's social media feeds. She barely acknowledged my presence, except to issue demands. I wasn't her partner. I was an unpaid intern, a live-in nanny, and a convenient, smiling prop to be dusted off whenever she needed to project domestic bliss for a lifestyle magazine interview. "Jack, make sure Emma is in the navy blue dress for the rally tomorrow. The red one washes me out," she would instruct, not even looking up as she poured a glass of wine. If Emma ran up to her, holding a crayon drawing, Rachel would offer a tight, irritated sigh. "Not right now, Em. Mommy is fixing the state. Jack, please take her." "I have a strategy call in 5 minutes." I would scoop up my heartbroken little girl, holding her tight, whispering that Mommy was just very busy doing incredibly important work. I tolerated the freezing isolation because I fiercely loved our daughter and respected the vows I had taken. I gaslit myself into believing that this was just a temporary phase. I told myself that the grueling, cutthroat nature of a state Senate race was simply draining her of her humanity, and that once November passed and the votes were tallied, I would get my wife back. I made excuses for her constant irritability and her dismissive cruelty. I rationalized every snapped order and every ignored family dinner. I thought I was simply enduring the storm of the election season. But as the campaign trail heated up and she hired a slick new campaign manager, the storm didn't pass. It morphed into something deeply sinister, and the pristine filter she had placed over our lives began to fracture, exposing a rot that ran deeper than I ever could have imagined. The shift in Rachel didn't happen overnight. It crept in like a slow-moving frost, gradually freezing the life out of our home until I was left shivering in the dark. It began in earnest when the primary elections concluded, and the general election loomed on the horizon like a massive, approaching storm. Rachel had secured her party's nomination, but the race for the state Senate seat was projected to be one of the tightest, most brutally contested battles in the district's history. She needed to elevate her game, she told me. She needed a shark. That shark arrived in the form of Marcus Vance, her newly appointed campaign manager. Marcus was 32, perpetually smelled of espresso and expensive, musky cologne, and wore tailored Italian suits that likely cost more than my first car. He was a political mercenary, known for taking underdog campaigns and ruthlessly dragging them across the finish line through sheer, aggressive strategy. From the moment he stepped over the threshold of our modest suburban home, he looked at me not as the husband of his employer, but as a quaint, slightly pathetic obstacle to her greatness. Jack Wright. Marcus had said on his first day, offering a firm, brief handshake that felt entirely dismissive. I've reviewed the campaign's visual assets. We love the devoted architect dad angle. It polls incredibly well with suburban women aged 30 to 50, but we're going to need to tighten up the messaging. Less domestic, more dynamic. We need Rachel looking like a leader, not just a PTA mom. I should have thrown him out of my house right then. I should have recognized the slick, arrogant disrespect dripping from his perfectly white teeth. But Rachel was absolutely captivated by him. She looked at Marcus with a ravenous intensity, hanging on his every word as he mapped out debate strategies and attack ads. I swallowed my pride, nodded politely, and retreated to the kitchen to fix Emma an after-school snack. I told myself that Marcus was just a necessary evil, a temporary fixture we had to endure until November. But Marcus didn't just take over the campaign. He took over my wife. As the summer bled into a sweltering early autumn, the fabric of our daily lives was completely rewritten. Our living room, once a place where Emma and I built blanket forts and watched cartoons, was transformed into a chaotic war room of whiteboards, polling printouts, and half-empty coffee cups. Rachel and Marcus were constantly huddled together on the sofa, speaking in hushed, urgent tones about demographics and donor retention. And then, the absences began. At first, it was just late nights at the campaign headquarters downtown. Rachel would come home long after midnight, slipping into bed smelling of stale office air and exhaustion. But as the election drew to within 3 months, the late nights morphed into complete disappearances. The traffic on the interstate is just too brutal, Jack, Rachel announced one Tuesday morning, aggressively zipping up a garment bag in our bedroom. Marcus and I have strategy sessions that are running until 2 in the morning. We're losing valuable hours just commuting back and forth to the suburbs. The campaign has authorized a suite at the Marquis Hotel downtown. I'll be staying there 3, maybe 4 nights a week until the debate prep is finished. A hotel? I asked, leaning against the doorframe, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. Rachel, Emma has her preschool play this Thursday. You promised you would be there. You missed her ballet recital last month. Rachel stopped, letting out a sharp, exasperated sigh. She looked at me in the mirror, her eyes devoid of any maternal warmth, reflecting only the icy calculation of a politician. Jack, please don't do this right now, she snapped, grabbing her briefcase. I am trying to secure millions of dollars in infrastructure funding for this state. I am trying to unseat a corrupt incumbent. I cannot be worrying about a preschool play where toddlers sing off-key for 10 minutes. You go, take a picture. Posted on the campaign's Instagram account with a caption about how much I wish I could be there. It's good optics. Good optics. That phrase became the universal justification for every broken promise, every missed dinner, and every prolonged absence. The woman who was running on a platform of restoring family values was treating her own family like an incredibly inconvenient chore. I was left holding the pieces of our fractured home together. I became a master at making excuses for her. When Emma would sit by the front window, her little face pressed against the glass waiting for a car that was never going to pull into the driveway, my heart would break into a million jagged pieces. I would scoop her up, spin her around to make her giggle, and whisper that Mommy was out being a superhero for the city, but that she loved her more than anything in the world. It was a lie, and deep down, I was beginning to know it. The red flags were no longer just waving, they were actively smothering me. Beyond the hotel stays and the constant, suffocating presence of Marcus, Rachel's behavior at home had become deeply erratic and guarded. The most undeniable shift was her phone. Rachel had always been attached to her device. It was the nature of modern politics, but she used to leave it on the kitchen counter or the nightstand without a second thought. Suddenly, the phone was an extension of her physical body. She took it into the bathroom while she showered. She slept with it tucked under her pillow. If she walked into a room and left it on the table, she would physically sprint back to retrieve it. The breaking point of my denial arrived on a rare Sunday morning when she was actually home. She was in the shower, and I was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Her primary phone, which she had accidentally left on the kitchen island, buzzed loudly with a text notification. Assuming it was her campaign assistant asking about the schedule, I casually reached over and tapped the screen to check the message for her. We had known each other's passcodes for 6 years. It had always been the year we met, combined with Emma's birth month. I typed it in. Incorrect passcode. I frowned, wiping a bit of flour from my hands, and tried again. Incorrect passcode. Just as the screen locked me out for a minute, Rachel walked into the kitchen, a towel wrapped around her wet hair. When she saw her phone in my hand, the color instantly drained from her face. It was a look of pure, unadulterated panic, which she immediately, violently masked with explosive anger. She lunged across the kitchen, snatching the device out of my hand with such force her fingernails scraped my palm. "What the hell are you doing?" She practically shrieked, clutching the phone tightly against her chest. I took a step back, completely taken aback by her venomous reaction. I was just checking the notification. I thought it might be Sarah from the office needing the itinerary for today. "You changed your passcode." "Yes, I changed my passcode, Jack," she yelled, her chest heaving. "I am running a high-profile political campaign. Do you have any idea the kind of sensitive donor information, the opposition research, the internal polling data I have on this device?" Marcus told me I had to lock down my digital security. It's a massive liability to just leave it open for anyone to snoop through. "Anyone?" I repeated, my voice dropping to a low, quiet register. "I'm not a political spy, Rachel. I'm your husband." "Then act like one." She fired back, her eyes narrowing with a cruel, dismissive glare. "Stop hovering over me. Stop suffocating me. Every time I come home for 5 minutes of peace, you're badgering me about family dinners or checking my phone. You are being incredibly needy, Jack, and I cannot afford it right now." "Needy?" I breathed, feeling a hot surge of anger finally burning through the ice. "I am raising our daughter entirely by myself while you play house in a luxury hotel downtown with your campaign manager. I am keeping this family afloat while you use us as a prop for your billboards. Do not dare lecture me about what I do for this family." She roared, stepping into my personal space, her voice dripping with absolute condescension. "I am building a legacy. I am securing our financial future. What are you doing? Drawing blueprints for rich people's patios in the spare bedroom. You have absolutely no idea what is at stake here. You have no idea the pressure I am under. So you need to back off, keep your mouth shut, and do the one job I asked you to do: manage this house." She turned on her heel, storming up the stairs and slamming the bedroom door so hard the framed photographs in the hallway rattled. I stood alone in the kitchen, the silence ringing in my ears. My hands were shaking. She had looked at me with absolute, unfiltered contempt. The woman I had married was completely gone, replaced by a ruthless, calculating stranger who viewed me as nothing more than a domestic servant standing in her way. Every instinct in my body was screaming that the changed passcodes and the hotel rooms had absolutely nothing to do with polling data or digital security. I knew, with a sickening, intuitive dread, that something much darker was happening behind the scenes of her pristine campaign. I just needed the proof. I didn't realize that the proof was already hiding in our home, tucked away in the lining of a toiletry bag, waiting to shatter my world into a million jagged pieces. It was a Thursday afternoon when the fragile, carefully maintained dam of my denial finally and irreversibly broke. The campaign was entering its final, most frantic sprint, and Rachel was scheduled to leave for a crucial 3-day bus tour across the rural counties of her district. The house was a chaotic whirlwind of nervous energy. Rachel was pacing the length of the downstairs hallway, her high heels clicking sharply against the hardwood, loudly negotiating a last-minute ad buy on her sleek flagship smartphone. "I don't care what the local affiliates are charging for the primetime slot, just buy it," Rachel barked into the phone, waving a dismissive hand in the air. She spotted me walking out of the kitchen with a cup of coffee. She didn't pause her conversation. She simply covered the receiver with her palm and issued a rapid-fire command. "Jack, I don't have time to pack. The driver is going to be here in 45 minutes. Go upstairs and pack my black leather weekender. 3 pantsuits, the navy blazer, and make sure my toiletry bag is fully stocked. Move." She uncovered the receiver and immediately went back to shouting at her media director. I stood there for a moment, gripping the warm ceramic of my coffee mug. A familiar, exhausting wave of humiliation washed over me, but I swallowed it down, just as I had 1,000 times before. I set the mug on the counter and walked upstairs to our master bedroom. I pulled her heavy, expensive leather weekender from the closet and began meticulously folding her tailored suits, laying them flat so they wouldn't wrinkle. Next, I moved to the master bathroom to gather her cosmetics. Rachel was fiercely particular about her skincare routine, insisting on a specific array of high-end serums and creams that she kept in a large, waterproof designer toiletry bag. I grabbed the heavy bag from beneath the sink. As I carried it into the bedroom to place it inside the weekender, my thumb brushed against something hard and unnaturally rigid pressing through the bottom fabric. I frowned, setting the bag down on the bed. I ran my hand over the bottom of the toiletry bag again. It wasn't a compact or a glass bottle of foundation. It felt like a small, flat rectangle, completely concealed within the thick, padded lining of the bag itself. Curiosity overcoming my usual restraint, I unzipped the main compartment and emptied the expensive bottles onto the duvet. I turned the bag inside out. Buried deep within the interior seams, nearly invisible unless you were actively looking for it, was a tiny, secondary zipper. My heart began to beat a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I pulled the zipper back and reached my fingers into the hidden pocket. I pulled out a phone. It wasn't her $1,200, top-of-the-line smartphone, the one she was currently using downstairs to scream at her staff. It was a cheap, generic, prepaid Android device, the kind you buy with cash at a gas station to avoid leaving a paper trail. The kind of phone drug dealers, criminals, and people leading deeply deceitful double lives use. Why in God's name would a candidate for the state Senate, a woman who had a dedicated campaign-issued secure device, need a hidden burner phone zipped into the lining of her makeup bag? My hands began to tremble. The cold, sickening dread I had been suppressing for months suddenly crystallized in my stomach. I pressed the power button on the side of the device. The screen illuminated, displaying a generic, preset wallpaper and a lock screen requiring a 4-digit PIN. I stared at the glowing numbers. Rachel was calculating, but when it came to digital security that didn't involve her campaign servers, she was remarkably predictable. I tried the year we were married. Incorrect. I tried the last 4 digits of her social security number. Incorrect. I took a shaky breath, closing my eyes. I thought about the supreme, sickening hypocrisy of her public platform. Rachel Davis, restoring family values. She constantly used our 4-year-old daughter as the ultimate symbol of her moral purity. I typed in Emma's birthday, 4/12. The lock screen vanished with a soft click. I was immediately dropped into the phone's messaging app. There were no campaign staffers listed here. There were no donors. There was only one active conversation thread, saved under a single initial, I didn't need to guess who M was. The scent of espresso and musky Italian cologne seemed to flood my memory instantly. I opened the thread, and the entire illusion of my life collapsed in a matter of seconds. The message history was a horrific, explicit, and utterly undeniable timeline of my wife's betrayal. It stretched back for months, perfectly aligning with every late-night strategy session, every emergency donor dinner, and every weekend she claimed to be trapped in debate prep. Room 402 at the Marquee, just checked in. Don't keep me waiting, Senator. Rachel, on my way up. The husband is clueless. He packed my bag for me this morning. Good boy, leave the door unlocked. My vision blurred. A hot, acidic surge of bile rose in the back of my throat. I scrolled up, my thumbs swiping frantically through the messages, drowning in the visceral, graphic evidence of their affair. There were photos, intimate, explicit pictures taken in the luxurious, marble-tiled bathrooms of downtown hotels. Pictures of my wife, the champion of family values, tangled in the sheets with Marcus, both of them grinning at the camera, completely intoxicated by their own arrogance and deceit. But the text messages weren't the only things saved in the thread. As I scrolled, I noticed several audio files, voice notes they had exchanged during the brief windows of time they were forced to be apart. My hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the device, I reached into my nightstand drawer, pulled out my Bluetooth earbuds, and put one in my right ear. I pressed play on a voice note Rachel had sent just 2 days prior. Her voice filled my ear. It wasn't the polished, measured tone she used at her town halls. It was a dark, venomous, mocking sneer. God, I can't wait to get out of this house tonight, Rachel's voice laughed, a cruel, breathless sound. Jack has been hovering all day. He keeps asking if we can have a family dinner this weekend. It makes me want to scream. He's just so pathetic, Marcus. He's turned into this perfectly docile little house husband. He literally spent an hour drawing unicorns with Emma while I was on a conference call with the governor. As long as I pat him on the head and tell him he's supporting my dreams, he just smiles and folds the laundry. I'll see you at 8. I need a real man tonight. I stopped the recording. The words hit me with the physical force of a sledgehammer. Docile little house husband. I had sacrificed my firm, my clients, and my own ambitions to be a present father to our child, to allow her to shine, and she viewed it as weakness. She viewed my devotion as something to be mocked with her lover in a luxury hotel. But the utter devastation wasn't finished. I pressed play on the next audio file, sent by Marcus. The polling numbers are up 2 points in the northern counties, Marcus's slick voice purred. We're going to win this thing, Ratch. By the way, I booked the penthouse suite at the Marquee for Thursday night. We deserve to celebrate. Rachel's voice note in response immediately followed. The penthouse. Marcus, that's $2,000 a night. Are you sure? Don't worry about it, Marcus replied, a sickeningly arrogant chuckle bleeding through the audio. I'm just expensing it under venue scouting through the primary campaign pack. The donors are footing the bill. They think they're buying a state senator, but they're really just paying for our room service. I froze, the air completely stalling in my lungs. The personal betrayal had broken my heart, but the political betrayal I had just uncovered was something entirely different. It was a felony. Rachel and Marcus weren't just sleeping together, they were actively embezzling campaign funds. They were illegally funneling wealthy donors money through her political action committee to finance their extravagant, illicit affair. I sat on the edge of the bed, the cheap burner phone resting in my trembling palm. The woman downstairs, currently shouting at her staff about media buys and public perception, was a total fraud. She was a cheating, manipulative, embezzling narcissist who had built her entire family values platform on a foundation of absolute rot. I heard Rachel's footsteps at the bottom of the stairs. Jack, the car is pulling up. Bring the bag down. The blinding, paralyzing shock began to recede, leaving behind a freezing, absolute clarity. I didn't scream. I didn't shatter the phone against the wall. Instead, I pulled out my own smartphone. I opened the camera and meticulously photographed the screen of the burner phone, every text, every picture, every timestamp. Then I quickly forwarded the audio files to an encrypted email address I used for my architectural firm. When the digital evidence was safely secured, I locked the burner phone. I tucked it back into the hidden lining of the toiletry bag, zipped it shut, and buried it beneath her expensive skin creams. I zipped the leather weekender shut, grabbed the handles, and walked down the stairs. Rachel was waiting by the front door, tapping her foot impatiently. "Finally," she huffed, snatching the bag from my hands. "I'll call you on Sunday, Jack. Remember to post that picture of Emma's play." "Have a good trip, Rachel," I said, my voice completely dead, staring at her with eyes that finally saw the monster beneath the candidate. "I'll hold down the fort." She walked out the door, entirely unaware that she had just handed me the very weapon I was going to use to destroy her. The 72 hours between finding the burner phone and Rachel's return from the campaign trail were an exercise in agonizing, suffocating psychological endurance. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the sickening, muffled audio of Rachel and Marcus laughing at my expense echoed in the dark. Docile little house husband. The donors are paying for our room service. I walked around our perfectly decorated, impeccably clean house, feeling like a ghost haunting my own life. I packed a suitcase in my mind 100 times. I imagined screaming, throwing her designer pantsuits onto the front lawn, and tearing the fake, political illusion down to the studs. But every time the fiery, destructive rage threatened to boil over, I would walk past Emma's bedroom. I would see her little superhero sneakers lined up neatly by the door, and the anger would instantly turn to ice-cold terror. If I simply blew up and walked out, I would be leaving my daughter alone with a narcissist who viewed her as nothing more than a highly engaging campaign prop. I had to be smart. Rachel's black campaign SUV pulled into the driveway at exactly 8:00 p.m. on Sunday. I was sitting at the massive marble kitchen island, the overhead pendant lights turned off, illuminated only by the under-cabinet LEDs. Sitting flat on the marble surface in front of me was a single, printed piece of paper. I heard the heavy thud of the front door, followed by the clatter of her leather weekender hitting the hardwood floor of the foyer. "God, I'm completely dead," Rachel called out, her voice carrying that manufactured, breezy exhaustion she used whenever she wanted to avoid conversation. She walked into the kitchen, wearing a pristine navy blazer and oversized sunglasses pushed up into her messy hair. She smelled like expensive hotel soap, airport coffee, and the faint, lingering spice of Marcus's cologne. "Where's Emma?" she asked, opening the refrigerator to grab a bottle of sparkling water without looking at me. "She's asleep," I said. My voice was entirely flat, stripped of the warmth I had freely given her for 6 years. She popped the cap off the water and finally turned to look at me, leaning against the counter. Her brow furrowed slightly, sensing the heavy, toxic atmosphere in the room. "Are you okay? You look like you haven't slept all weekend. Did Emma give you trouble? Also, I didn't see the post from her play on the Instagram grid." I didn't answer her. I reached forward and slid the printed piece of paper smoothly across the cool marble island until it stopped right in front of her hands. It was a high-resolution screenshot from her burner phone. It displayed a text exchange between her and Marcus, explicitly discussing the penthouse at the Marquis Hotel, topped with a photo of them kissing in the reflection of a bathroom mirror. "You left a zipper open in your toiletry bag," I said quietly. I watched her face, waiting for the crumble. I braced myself for the tears, the frantic apologies, the desperate, panicked begging that universally follows the exposure of a devastating lie. I expected her knees to buckle under the sheer, undeniable weight of her guilt. She stared at the paper for 10 seconds, her expression completely unreadable. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she reached out and pushed the paper back toward me. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She picked up her bottle of sparkling water, took a slow sip, and looked me dead in the eye. "So," Rachel said, her voice chillingly calm, completely devoid of an ounce of remorse, "you snooped." I stared at her, the breath entirely knocked out of my lungs by the sheer audacity of her reaction. "I snooped." I repeated, my voice rising, the carefully maintained dam of my composure beginning to crack. "Rachel, you are sleeping with your campaign manager. You are on tape calling me a docile house husband. I just watched my entire marriage disintegrate on a prepaid Android, and your response is that I snooped. Keep your voice down, she hissed, her eyes narrowing into cold reptilian slits. Emma is sleeping. Don't you dare use her as a shield right now. I snapped, standing up from the bar stool. How long? How long have you been sleeping with Marcus while I'm here raising our daughter? Does it matter? She asked casually, setting the water bottle down and crossing her arms. She looked at me not with the shame of a caught spouse, but with the profound irritation of a CEO dealing with a complaining subordinate. You know, Jack, I was hoping we could avoid this messy conversation until after the election, but since you decided to go digging through my private belongings, let's just lay it all out. She walked slowly around the kitchen island, closing the distance between us. The sociopathic lack of empathy in her posture made my skin crawl. You're mad, you're hurt, I get it, she began, her tone deeply patronizing. But let's look at the reality of our situation. This campaign is a multi-million-dollar machine. Do you know who my backers are? Do you know who funds my PACs? Real estate developers, tech billionaires, and the most powerful legal figures in the state. I am the future of this district. And you're an architect who draws patios in the spare bedroom. It's not about the money or the power. I yelled, stepping back from her. It's about our vows, it's about our family. Your entire platform is built on family values. My platform is a brand, Jack. She fired back, her voice finally rising to meet mine, sharp and venomous. It is a highly curated, wildly profitable product. And right now, you are a crucial part of that product. My voters love the supportive dad angle. But don't ever, for one single second, confuse your role in my campaign with actual leverage. Leverage? I breathed, utterly horrified. Yes, leverage, she said, stepping into my personal space, looking up at me with absolute, ruthless certainty. If you decide you want to be a martyr, if you pack a bag and walk into a divorce lawyer's office tomorrow and try to blow up my campaign, I promise you, I will completely destroy you. I shook my head, feeling a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. You cheated, I have proof. A photograph from a burner phone you illegally accessed. She laughed, a dark, breathless sound. Good luck getting a judge to care, but let me tell you what my legal team will submit. My donors play golf with the family court judges in this county, Jack. I will bury you in litigation until you are completely bankrupt. I will outspend you 50-1. And my PR team. She smiled, a wicked, terrifying grin. They will absolutely crucify you. She reached out, tracing a manicured fingernail lightly over the collar of my shirt. I flinched, swatting her hand away, but she just smiled wider. I control the narrative, she whispered. I have the press on speed dial. If you try to leave me and ruin this election, I will launch a media campaign claiming you were intensely jealous of my success. I will say you became unstable, controlling, and emotionally abusive. The internet and the local news will tear you to shreds before you can even issue a statement. And when it comes to custody. She paused, letting the silence stretch, ensuring the next words hit me with maximum, devastating impact. I am the wealthy, successful, beloved public servant. You are an unemployed freelancer with a ruined reputation. I will take full physical custody of Emma. You will be lucky to see her every other weekend, supervised. I will erase you from her life just as easily as I can erase you from my campaign trail. The kitchen felt like it was shrinking, the walls pressing in on me. She wasn't just threatening my pride, she was holding a gun to my relationship with my daughter. And the most terrifying part was, looking at her vast resources and the absolute adoration of her voter base, I knew she could probably pull it off. I was a nobody. She was a political titan. So, here is how this is going to work, Rachel dictated, stepping back and smoothing the front of her navy blazer. We are going to have an understanding. You will stay here. You will continue to take care of Emma. You will manage the house. And when I need you to smile for a photo op or stand behind me at a debate, you will put on a suit and look at me like I am the center of your universe. And you? I asked, my voice barely a cracked whisper. I deliberately left out any mention of the campaign embezzlement. That was my ace in the hole, and I wasn't going to show my hand. I will continue to win this election, and I will continue to see Marcus, she stated matter-of-factly. You get to live in a beautiful house, never worry about a bill, and spend every day with your daughter. You get everything you want, Jack, as long as you play your part and keep your mouth shut until November. If you don't, you lose Emma. She looked at me, waiting for my rebellion. She was daring me to fight her, daring me to give her an excuse to unleash the war dog she had just threatened me with. I looked at the woman standing in front of me, the mother of my child. She was completely hollow, a monster hiding behind a glossy campaign poster and a patriotic color palette. But I also looked at the ceiling, toward the room where my 4-year-old daughter was sleeping peacefully, entirely unaware that her family had just been taken hostage. I couldn't win a screaming match. I couldn't win a sudden, impulsive divorce filing against a machine. If I was going to survive this, if I was going to keep my daughter, I had to play the long game. I had to let her believe her threats had worked. I had to let her believe she had completely broken me. I dropped my gaze to the marble floor. I let my shoulders sag, adopting a posture of absolute crushing defeat. I forced a single tear to spill over my lash line, letting it track silently down my cheek. "Okay," I whispered, making my voice shake with surrender. "Okay, Rachel, whatever you want, just, please don't take Emma away from me." A look of profound, arrogant satisfaction washed over her face. The tension left her shoulders. She had flexed her immense political power, and the peasant had bowed. "Good choice, Jack," she said softly. She reached out and patted my cheek, a condescending, degrading gesture that made me want to vomit. "Now, tear that piece of paper up and throw it away. I have an early morning strategy session, and I need my suit steamed." She picked up her water bottle, grabbed her luggage, and walked out of the kitchen, her heels clicking rhythmically up the hardwood stairs. I stood alone in the dark kitchen for a long time. The tears on my face dried. The posture of defeat vanished, replaced by an ironclad, lethal resolve. She thought she had trapped me in a cage of her own design. But as I stared at the empty space where she had just stood, I realized something she had entirely overlooked. She had threatened to destroy my life using her political campaign. She had no idea that I was about to use that exact same campaign to completely, publicly, and irreversibly annihilate hers. The morning after my wife handed me the terms of my own psychological imprisonment, I woke up before the sun. I went downstairs to our immaculate, stainless steel kitchen and engaged in a ritual that now felt like a grotesque pantomime. I made Rachel her morning pour-over coffee and pulled her navy blue suit from the heavy wooden doors of the master closet, meticulously steaming the wrinkles out of the fabric just as she had commanded. When she finally descended the staircase an hour later, she looked refreshed, radiant, and utterly victorious. She took the coffee mug from my hand without a word of thanks, offering me a patronizing pat on the shoulder that made my skin crawl. "Marcus is picking me up in 20 minutes, she announced, checking her reflection in the dark glass of the microwave. "We have a full day of glad handing at the Rotary Club luncheons and then a donor dinner. I need you to handle Emma's drop-off and pickup and make sure the house is spotless. A photographer from State Capitol Monthly is coming by tomorrow morning to shoot some candid, home life B-roll for a feature piece." "Of course," I replied, keeping my voice soft, flat, and completely subservient. "Have a productive day. I'll make sure the house is ready." She offered a smug, glittering smile, entirely convinced that she had successfully broken my spirit. She believed that her threat had completely domesticated me, locking me neatly into the little box she had designed. And why wouldn't she? I was playing the part of the defeated, cowardly husband flawlessly. I kissed Emma on the forehead, strapped her into her car seat, and waved politely from the front porch as Marcus. The man who was sleeping with my wife on the donor's dime pulled his matte black SUV into our driveway to whisk her away. But the absolute second that Marcus's vehicle disappeared around the corner of our gated subdivision, the subservient, defeated husband ceased to exist. I dropped Emma off at her private preschool, offering her teacher my usual warm, friendly smile. Then, instead of returning to the house to clean or work on my architectural drafts, I drove straight out of our district. I knew better than to seek legal counsel in our city. Rachel's political tentacles reached deep into the local justice system. Her donors funded the re-election campaigns of the county judges. Her political action committees hosted galas attended by the managing partners of every major downtown law firm. If I walked into a high-rise legal office in my zip code, Rachel's team would know about it before I even finished filling out the intake paperwork. So, I drove 2 counties over. I crossed the district line, leaving the manicured suburbs and glossy political billboards behind, entering a gritty, working-class industrial city that Rachel's campaign wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. I had spent the entire sleepless night sitting in the dark of my home office, researching attorneys who operated outside the political elite's sphere of influence. I wasn't looking for a polished corporate lawyer who played golf at the country club. I needed a street fighter. I needed a shark who despised the corrupt political machine just as much as I did. That search led me to a fading brick building wedged between a pawn shop and a dry cleaner, housing the law office of Elias Thorne. Elias Thorne was a man in his late 60s, semi-retired, and notoriously ruthless in the courtroom. He had built his career taking on massive corporations and corrupt local officials, operating on a fierce, cynical brand of justice. I walked up a flight of creaking wooden stairs and entered his office. It smelled of stale coffee, old paper, and floor wax. Elias sat behind a massive, battered oak desk stacked high with legal briefs. He wore a rumpled tweed jacket, his reading glasses perched precariously at the end of his nose. He looked up, his sharp, calculating gray eyes assessing me instantly. "Jack Davis," Elias said, his voice a gravelly baritone. He didn't offer his hand. When the husband of the family values golden girl calls my office at 3 in the morning asking for a cash-only consultation, I tend to get curious. "Sit down. Tell me why you drove 50 miles to see a dinosaur like me." I didn't waste his time with emotional outbursts. I sat down and laid out the facts with clinical, architectural precision. I explained the sudden hotel stays, the hiring of Marcus, and the discovery of the burner phone. Then, I pulled a thick manila envelope from my briefcase. Inside were the high-resolution photographs I had taken of the burner phone's screen, the explicit text messages, the pictures from the hotel bathrooms, and transcripts of the voice notes where she mocked me and admitted to expensing the penthouse through her campaign pack. Elias adjusted his glasses and spent 5 agonizing minutes reading through the documents. He didn't flinch. He didn't gasp. When he finished, he tossed the envelope back onto the desk and leaned back in his creaking leather chair. "I confronted her last night," I continued, my voice tight. "She didn't apologize. She threatened me. She told me that if I filed for divorce and disrupted her election, she would use her donors to bury me in family court. She said she would use her PR team to paint me as an unstable, abusive parasite, and that she would ensure I lost custody of my daughter. She demanded I play the smiling prop until November, and I pretended to agree." Elias Thorne steepled his fingers, staring at me with a heavy, cynical sigh. "Your wife is a textbook narcissist, Mr. Davis, but unfortunately for you, she is an incredibly powerful, well-funded narcissist, and her threats, they aren't empty." "But I have the proof," I protested, pointing at the manila envelope. "I have proof of her adultery. I have proof that she calls our family a political brand." "You do," Elias nodded grimly. "But we live in a no-fault divorce state. The family courts do not strip a mother of custody simply because she couldn't keep her pants on. As for her derogatory comments about your marriage, a clever PR team and a high-priced lawyer will spin that into oblivion. They will claim she was venting under immense political pressure, or worse, they will claim you illegally accessed her private property and attempt to have the evidence stricken from the record entirely." I felt the blood drain from my face, a cold, heavy stone dropping into my stomach. So she just wins. She gets to treat me like a domestic servant and hold my daughter hostage. "I didn't say that," Elias corrected sharply, his gray eyes flashing with a sudden, predatory spark. "I am telling you the reality of the family court system. Family courts prioritize stability, resources, and public standing. Right now, her public standing is pristine. She is the family values candidate. She has millions of dollars in backing, the adoration of the voting public, and the ability to outspend you 50 to 1. If we walk into a courtroom today, it will be an absolute slaughter. She will drag the proceedings out for years, bleed you completely dry, and the judge will look at a successful, beloved public servant and gladly award her primary custody. Then how do I beat her? I asked, a desperate, hollow ache expanding in my chest. Elias leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. To beat a giant, Jack, you do not fight them where they are strongest. You cut them off at the knees. Her power, her legal defense, and her leverage over you rest completely on her political campaign. Her money comes from donors who require a squeaky clean, moral image. Her public support comes from voters who believe she is a devoted, flawless mother. Elias paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the dusty office. As your attorney, I cannot legally advise you to sabotage your spouse's political career, Elias stated, his tone shifting into a careful, deliberate cadence. But hypothetically speaking, if a major public scandal were to occur, if her donors were to suddenly drop her, if her political standing evaporated overnight and her reputation was irreparably destroyed by her own actions, she would have absolutely no leverage in a courtroom. She would be a pariah. A disgraced, radioactive politician cannot afford an army of lawyers. And a judge would look at a ruined, corrupt candidate facing a media firestorm and happily award primary custody to the stable, loving, actual primary caregiver. You. I stared at him, the pieces of the puzzle violently snapping together in my mind. I didn't need to fight her lawyers. I didn't need to fight a PR war. I needed to destroy the very foundation her power was built upon. I thought about the voice note. I'm just expensing it under venue scouting through the primary campaign pack. Infidelity is a personal failing, Elias whispered, watching the realization wash over my face. But campaign finance fraud, embezzling donor money to fund an affair. That is a state felony. If you can prove she's stealing from her own campaign, she won't just lose the election. She'll lose everything. I understand, I said softly, a dark, dangerous clarity washing over me. In the meantime, Elias commanded, writing a list on a legal pad and tearing it off for me, you must continue to play the compliant, defeated husband. Do not give her a single reason to suspect you are planning to strike. I want you to meticulously document your life with your daughter. I want pediatric records showing you are the only parent who takes Emma to the doctor. I want preschool logs showing you do every drop-off and pickup. I want a silent, undeniable paper trail proving that you are the sole pillar of that child's existence. I can do that, I nodded, folding the paper and sliding it into my jacket pocket. Good, Elias smiled, a cold, shark-like grin. Gather your arsenal, Jack. Follow the money. And when her campaign inevitably burns to the ground, call me. I will be ready to pick through the ashes. I stood up, shook his hand, and walked out of the dusty brick building. As I drove back across the county line, returning to the glossy, manicured suburbs of my wife's district, I didn't feel like a hostage anymore. Rachel thought she was the undisputed director of this political theater. She had absolutely no idea that I was about to hijack the broadcast. For the next 8 weeks, I delivered the greatest acting performance of my entire life. If Rachel thought her meticulously scripted debate answers and tearful public apologies were masterpieces of deception, she had absolutely nothing on the facade I constructed inside our own home. To her, and to her arrogant manager, I had become the ultimate broken doormat. I had completely accepted my role as the captive political spouse. Her boldness escalated with terrifying speed once she believed I was too afraid of losing my daughter to fight back. The manufactured fights and flimsy excuses to leave the house stopped entirely. She no longer felt the need to hide her relationship with Marcus. He began coming over to the house constantly, not just for campaign prep, but for dinners, Sunday brunches, and late-night strategy sessions that lasted well past midnight. He would lounge on our expensive linen sofa, his polished Oxfords propped up on the coffee table, sipping the scotch I had bought with my own money. "Jack, grab Marcus another glass, would you?" Rachel would call out from the kitchen island, not even looking up from her tablet. "Sure thing," I would reply, my voice dripping with mild, agreeable compliance. I would fetch the glass, hand it to the man sleeping with my wife, and offer a polite, vacant smile. Internally, a dark, raging inferno threatened to consume me, but I forced the fire down into the freezing, methodical depths of my mind. I was no longer a victim, I was an architect. I was gathering the arsenal that would soon reduce her campaign to ash. Elias Thorne had given me my marching orders. I needed to build a silent, undeniable paper trail proving that I was the sole emotional and physical pillar of my daughter's life. Family courts, Elias had explained, dealt in hard facts, not he said she said accusations. I needed documents. I started at Emma's preschool. I made an appointment to sit down with Mrs. Gable, her teacher, under the guise of wanting to check on her social development. After a pleasant conversation about Emma's love for building blocks, I smoothly transitioned to the real reason for my visit. "Mrs. Gable, I'm trying to organize our family records for a new filing system at home," I lied flawlessly. "Would it be possible to get a printout of the authorized pickup and drop-off logs for the year, just for my own peace of mind?" "Of course, Mr. Davis," the sweet, older woman smiled, pulling up the file on her computer. As the printer whirred to life, she offered a sympathetic, knowing sigh. "You know, Jack, I have to commend you. You are such an involved father. We see a lot of busy political families here, but you are the only one who has signed Emma in and out every single day since September. And you're always the one at the parent-teacher conferences." "Rachel's schedule is just incredibly demanding right now," I offered, playing the supportive husband. "I understand," Mrs. Gable replied gently, handing me the thick stack of printed logs. "But children remember who shows up. You're doing a wonderful job." I walked out of the school with a 40-page document proving that Rachel hadn't picked up her daughter from school a single time in over 8 months. Next was the pediatrician. I visited Dr. Aris's clinic, utilizing the same polite, organized demeanor to request copies of Emma's complete medical history and visitation logs. The receptionist handed over the files without a second thought. As I flipped through them in the parking lot, the evidence was stark and damning. Every single signature on the intake forms, every single emergency contact update, every single vaccination consent form for the last 4 years bore only one name: Jack Davis. Rachel's signature didn't exist in the medical record. To the healthcare system, she was practically a phantom. I scanned all the documents, encrypted the files, and emailed them directly to Elias Thorne. The foundation of my custody case was now mathematically bulletproof. But the custody battle was only half of the war. To truly cripple her leverage, I needed to uncover the financial rot festering beneath her multi-million-dollar campaign. Because I had been the one to set up her initial campaign website and manage the early donor databases before she hired Marcus, I still had master administrative access to the campaign's financial backend. Rachel, in her arrogant belief that I was nothing more than a docile house husband, had never bothered to revoke my IP clearance. She had changed her personal phone password, but she had completely neglected the central nervous system of her own political machine. Late one Tuesday night, while Rachel and Marcus were supposedly at a trendy downtown restaurant discussing debate synergy, I sat in the dark of my home office. I bypassed the standard user interface and accessed the network's root directory, sifting through the encrypted campaign ledgers she thought were securely hidden. Political campaigns are subject to strict financial reporting laws. Every dollar of donor money must be accounted for and spent strictly on campaign-related expenses. But as I cross-referenced the Federal Election Commission filings with the actual bank disbursements, a massive, glaring discrepancy emerged. A major tech billionaire had recently donated $50,000 to her primary political action committee. But according to the FEC filings, only $20,000 had been reported. My eyes narrowed in the blue light of the monitor. $30,000 was missing. I dug deeper, my fingers flying across the keyboard, tracing the digital breadcrumbs she had carelessly left behind in her expense folders. It took me nearly 3 hours, but just past 2 in the morning, I finally found the leak. It was a completely separate, heavily shielded consulting firm registered as a vendor for the campaign. The name of the firm was Vance Strategic Solutions. I pulled up the vendor invoices. The principal managing director listed on the paperwork was Marcus Vance. A cold, vicious thrill ran down my spine as the reality of the scheme clicked into place. She wasn't just cheating on me physically. She was actively, methodically embezzling campaign funds. She and Marcus were deliberately siphoning tens of thousands of dollars of donor money out of the campaign accounts, mislabeling them as consulting fees, and hiding the cash in Marcus's dummy corporation to fund their luxury hotel suites, expensive dinners, and illicit weekends. She was stealing from her own supporters. It was a massive, undeniable case of campaign finance fraud and a direct violation of state and federal law. I downloaded every single ledger, every wire transfer receipt, and the vendor invoices. I packaged them into a secure zip file and sent them into the waiting, predatory hands of Elias Thorne. "Got it," Elias replied via text mere minutes later, proving the old shark never actually slept. "This is a state felony, Jack. The DA will absolutely crucify her for defrauding her donors. We have the sword, we just need her to step into the arena." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a long, slow breath into the quiet, dark room. The legal trap was fully loaded. The custody evidence was ironclad. The financial fraud was documented. Elias was ready to completely dismantle Rachel in the courtroom the moment her public facade collapsed. But I didn't want this to just be a quiet, legal victory. Rachel had looked me in the eye and threatened to use her political power to destroy my reputation, paint me as unstable, and take my daughter. She had weaponized her public standing against me. Therefore, it was only fitting that the public would be the ones to witness her true face. A week later, the golden opportunity presented itself. Rachel swept into the kitchen, buzzing with manic, caffeinated energy, and slammed a thick debate prep binder onto the marble island. "Jack, I need you to prep the media files for the town hall on Thursday," she announced, her eyes shining with pure, unadulterated ambition. "This is the final, most important debate of the election. It's being broadcast live on the state news network. I need you to edit together a 2-minute family video to play as my grand introduction before I walk out on stage. I want heartwarming footage of us in the park, Emma laughing, make it look perfect. The AV team needs the final file on a flash drive by tomorrow." I looked at the marketing binder, then looked up at my wife. The woman who had called me a parasite, the woman who was actively stealing her donors' money. "A live broadcast," I repeated softly, my voice perfectly level. "Statewide." "Yes," she snapped, impatient. "I'll be doing my opening remarks immediately after the video plays. Marcus is handling the press pool. Can you handle the video editing, or do I need to hire an actual production assistant?" I offered her a gentle, reassuring smile, hiding the executioner's blade securely behind my teeth. "Don't worry, Rachel," I said smoothly. "I'll handle the video. It's going to be an introduction your voters will never, ever forget." The day of the town hall debate dawned with a heavy, oppressive tension that seemed to seep into the very foundation of our house. By 7:00 a.m., the place was practically humming with the nervous energy of campaign staffers, media liaisons, and makeup artists. Rachel's team had decided to use our home as the staging ground for the morning press briefing, a final push to solidify the family values optics before she stepped onto the debate stage that evening. I navigated the chaos with the practiced, invisible grace of an unpaid intern. The first and most vital step of my operation had nothing to do with video editing or digital files. It had to do with my daughter. I had arranged for Emma to spend the entire day and night with my sister, who lived a few towns over. I told Rachel it was to ensure the house remained distraction-free for her debate prep, a suggestion she enthusiastically praised as surprisingly strategic. In reality, I was evacuating my little girl from the blast radius. When the political bomb I was building finally detonated, I wanted Emma as far away from the toxic fallout as physically possible. Once Emma was safely out the door, I retreated to my home office, the designated media prep room for the day. The town hall debate was the undisputed climax of the election cycle. It was being broadcast live across the state news network, syndicated to local affiliates, and streamed concurrently on multiple social media platforms. The stakes were astronomical, and Rachel was practically vibrating with ambition. Jack. Rachel's voice pierced through the hum of the campaign staffers in the hallway. I stepped out of my office. Rachel was standing in the foyer, being pinned into a sharp, patriotic red blazer by a frantic stylist. "Yes," I asked, keeping my hands casually shoved in my pockets. "I need that family video loaded onto a secure flash drive by noon," she instructed, not looking at me, but staring critically at her reflection in the foyer mirror. "The AV team at the auditorium needs to hardwire it into the broadcast server for my opening introduction. It has to be perfect, Jack. I want heartwarming. I want suburban bliss. I want them to look at that video and see a woman who fights for their children because she loves her own." Marcus stepped out from the kitchen, holding a clipboard and his ever-present espresso. He was wearing a dark, tailored suit and his signature arrogant smirk. He walked up behind Rachel, handing her a printed sheet of debate topics. "Make sure the audio mix is level, Marcus said, looking at me with thinly veiled contempt. When she steps up to the podium, the lights are going to dim, and she's going to say the activation phrase. Because the voters of this state deserve the unfiltered truth. That's the cue for the AV tech to roll the video. Don't screw up the rendering." "I've got it, Marcus," I said. "The unfiltered truth. I'll make sure it plays perfectly." "Good," Marcus smirked, turning his attention back to his clipboard. "We are expecting upwards of 2 million viewers across all platforms tonight. This is the kill shot for the campaign. Let's not fumble the ball on the 1-yard line." I turned and walked back to the quiet sanctuary of my dark office. I closed the heavy oak door, locking it from the inside with a soft, definitive click. I sat down at my drafting desk and stared at the multi-monitor setup glowing in front of me. On the left monitor was the professional video editing software I occasionally used for architectural presentations. On the right monitor was a localized folder containing the media assets for the family video. A highly sanitized, sickeningly sweet montage of Rachel pushing Emma on a swing set, Rachel reading a bedtime story, and the three of us walking a borrowed golden retriever through a sunlit park. My hands hovered over the keyboard. My heart was beating a slow, heavy, rhythmic drumbeat against my ribs. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't terrified. I felt an absolute, terrifyingly cold sense of purpose. I opened the hidden, password-protected directory on my desktop. I dragged the high-resolution screenshots of the burner phone text, the photos from the hotel bathroom, and the devastating voice notes into the media bit. I began to construct the Trojan horse. For the first 45 seconds of the video, I left the original, heartwarming footage entirely intact. The upbeat, acoustic royalty music played cheerfully in the background. It looked exactly like the political masterpiece Rachel had demanded. But at the 46-second mark, I placed a hard, sudden cut to black. I dropped in the first voice note, visually pairing it with a screenshot of Rachel and Marcus kissing in the hotel bathroom. I cranked the audio gain on the track, ensuring that her dark, venomous laugh would blast through the auditorium speakers with deafening fury. Jack has been hovering all day. He's just so pathetic, Marcus. He's turned into this perfectly docile little house husband. I'll see you at 8. I need a real man tonight. Then I dropped in the second voice note, pairing it with the undeniable screenshots of the campaign ledgers and the vendor invoices for Vance Strategic Solutions. I booked the penthouse suite. I'm just expensing it under venue scouting through the primary campaign pack. The donors are footing the bill. They think they're buying a state senator, but they're really just paying for our room service. I meticulously reviewed the timeline. The edits were seamless. The audio was pristine. The visual evidence of the campaign finance fraud was held on screen long enough for anyone with a smartphone to snap a picture of the television broadcast. I rendered the final file, naming it Rachel Davis Family Intro Final, MP4. I copied it onto a sleek, silver flash drive bearing the campaign logo. At exactly noon, I unlocked the office door and walked into the living room. The house had mostly cleared out, the staffers migrating to the downtown auditorium to finalize the debate prep. Rachel and Marcus were standing by the front door, preparing to leave. "Here," I said, holding out the flash drive. Marcus snatched it from my hand without a word of thanks, dropping it into the breast pocket of his tailored suit. "I'll see you tonight, Jack," Rachel said, offering me a tight, entirely manufactured smile. "The campaign secured you a seat in the front row, right behind my podium. Wear the gray suit with the blue tie." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied smoothly. They walked out the door, entirely unaware that the man they viewed as a docile house husband had just handed them a live grenade wrapped in a silver bow. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the quiet, empty house. I packed a single, small bag with my essential documents and a change of clothes. I called Elias Thorne, confirming that the digital copies of the financial ledgers had been securely filed and were ready to be released to the district attorney the absolute second the broadcast imploded. "The trap is set, Jack," Elias' gravelly voice rasped through the phone. "When that video plays tonight, the political machine isn't going to try and save her. They are going to amputate her to save themselves. The DA will move on the embezzlement charges by morning." "Good," I said, feeling a sense of absolute, ironclad resolve settling over me. "Are you ready?" Elias asked. "I am," I replied, hanging up the phone. I walked upstairs, put on the gray suit with the blue tie, and adjusted my collar in the mirror. I didn't look like a political prop anymore. I looked like a man who was about to go to war for his daughter's future. I grabbed my car keys and headed for the downtown auditorium, ready to watch the family values candidate face the unfiltered truth. The mechanical switch of the Scene B transition triggered on my stream deck with a soft, definitive click. It was such a small, effortless physical movement, yet the digital shockwave it unleashed was catastrophic. On my left monitor, the open broadcaster software interface instantly executed the command. The transition swept across the screen. The brilliantly lit, high-definition feed of my wife, standing at the podium in a tailored patriotic red blazer, looking directly into the lens as she delivered the final line of her intro with practiced sincerity, vanished into the digital ether. In its place, the heavily edited family video went live to over 1 million concurrent viewers. For the first 45 seconds, it was exactly what the campaign had ordered. The soft, acoustic guitar melody played as the screen displayed sunlit, hyper-sanitized footage, Rachel pushing Emma on a swing set, Rachel and I walking hand in hand through a local park, Rachel reading a bedtime story with the lighting adjusted to make her look almost angelic. I watched the live chat feed on the right monitor. It was flying by at light speed, filled with supportive comments. "So authentic. She's got my vote. A real mother." At the 46-second mark, the acoustic guitar abruptly cut off. The Sunny Park footage went completely black. There was a disorienting visual whiplash for the audience. The chat feed suddenly hitched. The relentless scrolling slowed to a confused crawl as 1 million screens across the state displayed a stark, unmoving screenshot of a text message exchange from the hidden burner phone, paired with a dark, grainy photo taken in the reflection of a hotel bathroom mirror. And then, the high-fidelity audio kicked in, bypassing the auditorium microphones entirely and feeding directly into the broadcast mix. "God, I can't wait to get out of this house tonight," Rachel's voice laughed, her dark, venomous giggle cutting through the air. "Jack has been hovering all day. He keeps asking if we can have a family dinner this weekend. It makes me want to scream." In the downtown auditorium, a profound, suffocating silence dropped over the crowd like an anvil. Rachel had a massive confidence monitor set up just below the main camera lens so she could watch the broadcast feed in real time. The fake, maternal smile was still plastered across her face, frozen in a state of suspended animation. Her eyes darted to the monitor. She expected to see herself frolicking in a sunlit field. Instead, she saw herself backed against a hotel room wall, fiercely kissing her campaign manager. The blood drained from her face so rapidly she looked as though she had been physically struck. Her jaw dropped. Her hands, resting elegantly on the podium, began to tremble with a sudden, violent tremor. "He's just so pathetic, Marcus." The recorded version of Rachel scoffed through the massive auditorium speakers, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "He's turned into this perfectly docile little house husband. As long as I pat him on the head and tell him he's supporting my dreams, he just smiles and folds the laundry. I'll see you at 8. I need a real man tonight." "Cut the feed." Marcus shrieked from the side of the stage, his slick, arrogant demeanor completely evaporating as he lunged toward the AV booth. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated terror. "Cut the feed right now." I didn't move a single muscle in my home office. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, my hands folded neatly in my lap, and watched the right monitor. The YouTube live chat was no longer stalled. It had erupted into an absolute, apocalyptic frenzy. The text was flying by so fast the server was struggling to render the comments. "Wait, what is this? Is that her campaign manager? OMG, she is cheating on her husband. Docile little house husband. She's a monster. WTF is happening? Someone screen record this right now." In the auditorium, the AV technicians were frantically hitting buttons, but they were locked out. I had routed the master control through my home server. They were merely receiving the signal I was broadcasting. The video on the screens suddenly shifted. The hotel bathroom photo was replaced by high-resolution scans of the campaign's financial ledgers, the secret FEC filings, and the vendor invoices for Vance Strategic Solutions. "The polling numbers are up 2 points in the northern counties," Marcus's slick voice purred through the audio track. "We're going to win this thing, Ratch. By the way, I booked the penthouse suite at the Marquis for Thursday night. We deserve to celebrate." Rachel's voice note in response immediately followed, echoing out to the stunned crowd of voters, donors, and press pool reporters. "The penthouse. Marcus, that's $2,000 a night. Are you sure?" "Don't worry about it," Marcus replied, a sickeningly arrogant chuckle bleeding through the audio. "I'm just expensing it under venue scouting through the primary campaign pack. The donors are footing the bill. They think they're buying a state senator, but they're really just paying for our room service." If the cheating had merely wounded her campaign, that specific string of sentences was the fatal gunshot to the head. She hadn't just humiliated her husband. She had openly, viciously admitted to defrauding the very people sitting in the front rows of that auditorium. She had admitted that her entire family values platform was a cynical, manufactured cash grab to fund her illicit lifestyle. The auditorium erupted. It wasn't just gasps. It was a cacophony of outrage, shouted questions from journalists, and furious yells from betrayed donors who realized their money had paid for her penthouse affairs. "Turn it off," Rachel screamed, her voice cracking as she slammed her hands against the podium, her carefully maintained political facade completely shattering on live television. She didn't even bother to try and issue an excuse. She scrambled backward, almost tripping over her heels, fleeing the stage in blind panic. Marcus was right behind her, shoving a cameraman out of the way as they sprinted toward the green room doors. I let the screen hold on the vendor invoices for 5 agonizing seconds, letting the silence ring out over the broadcast stream as the auditorium feed showed the empty podium. Then, I reached forward and clicked the End Stream button. The red live indicator in the corner of the OBS software blinked off. The connection severed. The digital transmission was permanently terminated, but the damage was irreversible. In the age of the internet, a broadcast to 2 million people is never truly gone. Hundreds of thousands of voters, rival political campaigns, and news stations had already screen-recorded every single devastating second of the feed. It was already spreading across Twitter, TikTok, and Reddit like a highly contagious virus. I reached forward and pulled the master power cord from the back of the desktop, ensuring they couldn't attempt a panicked, desperate reboot to try and issue an immediate apology. I stood up from my chair, my heart rate incredibly steady. I felt lighter than I had in 5 years. My phone, sitting on the desk, began to vibrate. Then it began to chime. And then, it erupted into an absolute, relentless cacophony of notifications as Elias Thorne, news outlets, and thousands of outraged citizens began reacting to the apocalypse that had just been broadcast to the world. The filter was gone. The campaign was burning. And as I grabbed my small overnight bag and walked quietly out of the house, I knew the war was already won. I pulled out of my driveway for the last time, watching the massive, glossy Rachel Davis for State Senate yard sign shrink and disappear in my rearview mirror. The cool autumn air whipped through the open windows of my car, and for the first time in over a year, I took a deep, unrestricted breath. The suffocating weight of my wife's manufactured reality, the endless tiptoeing, and the crushing humiliation of playing the docile prop had instantly evaporated. I drove across the county line to my sister's house, leaving the epicenter of the political earthquake far behind me. When I arrived, the house was wonderfully quiet. I crept into the guest room where Emma was fast asleep, her small arms wrapped tightly around her favorite stuffed bear. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a long time, just listening to the soft, rhythmic sound of her breathing. I had done it. She was safe. She would never be used as a political pawn, dressed in specifically chosen colors to appease a demographic, ever again. I turned off my phone, entirely ignoring the apocalyptic barrage of text messages, missed calls, and frantic voicemails that were undoubtedly flooding my inbox. And for the first time in months, I slept a dreamless, peaceful sleep. The internet, however, never sleeps, and it absolutely loves a spectacular, catastrophic downfall. When I woke up the next morning, I poured myself a cup of black coffee, sat at my sister's kitchen table, and opened my laptop. The destruction of Rachel's campaign was not a slow leak. It was a real-time, digital implosion of unprecedented proportions. I didn't even have to search for her name. When I opened Twitter, the top 4 trending hashtags in the United States were entirely dedicated to the town hall broadcast: Rachel Davis fraud, family values fake, #room service ratch, and justice for Jack. The video of her fleeing the stage in blind panic was everywhere. It was playing on a continuous loop on the morning news networks, dissected by political commentators and late-night talk show hosts alike. While the exposure of her infidelity was certainly a massive point of scandalous gossip, it wasn't the catalyst for the absolute, unbridled rage boiling over across the state. The voters had seen political cheating scandals before. What the public does not forgive, however, is a candidate biting the very hand that feeds them while stealing from their pockets. Rachel's fatal mistake wasn't just sleeping with Marcus. Her fatal mistake was getting caught on crystal-clear audio mocking the intelligence of the voters, calling her devoted constituency mindless, and explicitly admitting that her entire family values platform was a cynical, manufactured lie designed to secure donor money. She had shattered the public trust. She had insulted the very people who had volunteered for her, knocked on doors for her, and believed in her moral superiority. But the social media backlash was merely the surface level of the destruction. The true, fatal blow to her empire was happening behind the closed doors of her most powerful financial backers. In politics, wealthy donors and political action committees are notoriously risk-averse. They will overlook a multitude of personal sins as long as a candidate is viable and useful. But campaign finance fraud, embezzlement, that is a radioactive state felony that carries the threat of federal investigation. No billionaire real estate developer or powerful judge wants the district attorney subpoenaing their financial records because their chosen candidate decided to funnel their donations into a dummy corporation to pay for a penthouse affair. By 9:00 a.m., the corporate and political exodus had begun. A prominent tech CEO who had maxed out his individual contributions to her campaign released a swift, sterile statement on his company's letterhead, announcing he was deeply disturbed by the allegations of financial impropriety and was formally withdrawing his endorsement. The state party chairman followed suit less than an hour later, publicly distancing the party apparatus from her campaign and calling for an immediate ethics investigation. It was a domino effect of ruthless political self-preservation. Nobody wanted their name or their money associated with a woman trending globally for defrauding her campaign and emotionally abusing her husband. In less than 24 hours, Rachel's multi-million-dollar war chest was completely frozen. But the most devastating betrayal came from within her own ranks. Marcus Vance was a political mercenary. He survived in the cutthroat world of campaign management by always being the smartest, most ruthless person in the room. He knew exactly how the justice system worked, and he knew that the digital paper trail I had broadcasted to the world was mathematically bulletproof. The moment the ship hit the iceberg, Marcus didn't stay to help Rachel patch the hull. He shoved her out of the way, grabbed the only lifeboat, and rowed away as fast as humanly possible. At 10:30 a.m., my burner phone buzzed against the wooden kitchen table. It was a call from Elias Thorne. "Turn on the local news, Jack," Elias' gravelly voice barked, practically purring with cynical satisfaction. "The rats are eating each other." I pulled up the live feed of the local news affiliate. A reporter was standing live outside the towering glass building of the district attorney's office. "In a stunning development this morning," the reporter announced, pressing an earpiece to her head, "Marcus Vance, the campaign manager for state Senate candidate Rachel Davis, has just surrendered himself to the district attorney's office. Sources close to the investigation confirm that Vance has secured a powerhouse defense attorney and is currently negotiating an immunity deal, offering to turn state's evidence against Davis regarding the alleged embezzlement of campaign funds." I let out a low, disbelieving breath. "He flipped on her." "Of course he flipped on her," Elias laughed darkly over the phone. "There is no honor among thieves, Jack. Marcus knows that the vendor invoices for his dummy corporation are a direct path to a 10-year prison sentence. By turning over Rachel's private communications, all of her emails, and the master financial ledgers, he saves his own skin and leaves her holding the entire bag. The DA just secured a warrant. They are raiding her campaign headquarters right now." "So she's cornered," I said, feeling the sheer magnitude of the victory finally settling into my bones. "She isn't just cornered, Jack," Elias corrected smoothly. "She is politically dead, legally defenseless, and entirely bankrupt. I filed the emergency injunction this morning, freezing all of your joint marital assets to protect them from civil forfeiture. Her PR crisis firm just quit because she can't pay their retainer. She cannot access a single dime of her money. She is currently barricaded inside your empty house, watching the police carry boxes of evidence out of her campaign office on live television." Elias paused, letting the beautiful, poetic justice of the moment hang in the air. "I am officially filing the divorce petition and the motion for sole physical and legal custody of Emma this afternoon," Elias continued. "Rachel threatened to use her power to destroy you, but without her campaign, she has no power. She has no leverage. The DA is preparing to formally indict her by the end of the week." When the first Tuesday in November finally arrived, the election wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. Rachel's name remained on the ballot. It was too late to remove it, but she was a ghost. She hadn't made a single public appearance since sprinting off the stage at the town hall. The voters of our district, fueled by a mixture of deep betrayal and profound disgust, turned out in record numbers to vote against her. She lost the election by a historic, humiliating landslide, securing less than 12% of the vote. The family values candidate was completely eradicated by the very public she had so arrogantly mocked. Her political career was reduced to a smoldering crater. And as I sat in my sister's living room, watching the final election results roll in on the television with Emma curled up happily against my side, I knew the real fight. The fight for my daughter's future was already over before we even stepped foot into a courtroom. They say that the wheels of justice turn slowly, but I learned that they can spin with blinding, terrifying speed when a politician's shield of power is suddenly and violently stripped away. With her campaign war chest frozen by the State Ethics Commission and the Federal Election Commission breathing down her neck, Rachel's high-priced, country club legal team abandoned her the absolute second their massive retainers bounced. She was left stranded, forced to hire a deeply overwhelmed mid-tier defense attorney to help her navigate the catastrophic, smoldering wreckage of both our marriage and her impending criminal trial. When we finally stood before the family court, judge a month after the election, Rachel was a ghost of the woman who had cornered me in our kitchen. The tailored, patriotic power suits were gone, replaced by a plain, off-the-rack beige blazer. The effortless, blowout hair was pulled back into a tight, severe knot. She sat at the polished mahogany table of the courtroom, staring blankly at her folded hands, entirely unable to look me in the eye. Elias Thorne didn't just win the custody hearing, he orchestrated an absolute legal masterpiece. Because Rachel was under active federal and state investigation for felony embezzlement, and because I had meticulously documented pediatric records and school logs proving I was Emma's sole caregiver, Rachel had zero leverage. The judge didn't even entertain her lawyer's flimsy arguments. I was effortlessly awarded full physical and legal custody of Emma, along with the family home and the majority of our liquid marital assets. Rachel was granted supervised visitation every other weekend, the exact, terrifying sentence she had so arrogantly threatened to impose upon me when she thought she held all the cards. Her criminal fate was even more severe. Marcus Vance, ever the cowardly mercenary, secured a generous plea deal by handing the district attorney the keys to the kingdom. He provided every text message, every fake vendor invoice, and every wire transfer proving that Rachel was the mastermind behind the scheme to defraud her donors. Facing a mountain of irrefutable digital evidence and a looming 10-year prison sentence, Rachel took a plea bargain. She avoided maximum time, but she was permanently barred from ever holding public office again, heavily fined, and sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security facility. The family values candidate, who had used her husband and daughter as smiling props on glossy billboards, was completely erased from the public sphere, remembering only as a cautionary tale of hubris and greed. As for me, I didn't retreat back into the shadows. Once the divorce was finalized, I sold the massive, sterile suburban house that had served as the backdrop for her political theater. I used the settlement money to buy a beautiful, cozy mid-century modern home in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood far away from the local political machine. Without the suffocating, 24/7 weight of managing Rachel's fake public image, my architecture firm flourished. I brought on 2 junior partners, taking on sustainable design projects that I genuinely loved. I even started dating again, a wonderful, grounded woman who works as a local high school teacher and who values honesty above all else. On a warm Saturday morning, exactly a year after the infamous town hall broadcast, I was standing in my new kitchen, flipping pancakes. Emma ran into the room, wearing a mismatched superhero cape over her pajamas, giggling hysterically as she chased our newly adopted rescue dog around the kitchen island. I watched my daughter, her face glowing with genuine, unfiltered joy. I didn't reach for a camera. I didn't worry about her outfit clashing with my shirt. I didn't think about the aesthetic composition of the room or how this moment would poll with suburban demographics. I just picked her up, kissed her cheek, and sat down at the table to eat breakfast with her. My life wasn't a broadcast anymore. It wasn't a political brand, a focus group, or a monetization strategy. It was real. And for the first time in a very long time, it was more than enough. A valuable lesson for the listener. If there is one absolute, echoing truth to take away from Jack Davis's story, it is this: true power isn't found in titles, wealth, or manipulating the public. When you build your life on a foundation of lies and arrogance, it only takes one brave person to turn on the lights and bring the whole house of cards crashing down. Narcissists and manipulators thrive on making their victims feel small. Rachel used her political connections, her wealthy donors, and her carefully crafted public persona to convince Jack that he was powerless. She weaponized his love for his daughter, threatening to destroy his life if he didn't submit to her cruel, humiliating demands, and play the part of a docile servant. When we are faced with abusers who seem to hold all the cards and wield all the influence, our immediate instinct is often to surrender just to survive. But power built on a foundation of lies is incredibly, dangerously fragile. Jack survived not by screaming, arguing, or throwing a public tantrum, but by recognizing the massive, structural flaw in his wife's empire. He realized his own worth. He meticulously gathered his evidence, secured the right allies, and let her own arrogance be the very thing that destroyed her. You do not have to accept a life of quiet desperation just because someone else holds the microphone or the checkbook. Your worth is not defined by someone else's ambition or the way a toxic partner treats you behind closed doors. If you are being manipulated, gaslit, or forced to live in the shadows of someone else's ego, remember Jack's quiet, lethal resolve. Gather your strength, document the truth, and refuse to participate in their illusion. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. Have you ever had to deal with a partner or family member who cared more about their public image or career than the people who actually loved them? How did you break free from their illusion? Let me know your thoughts and your stories in the comments below. If you found Jack's journey as thrilling and empowering as I did, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another incredible story. Until next time, know your worth, protect your peace, and take care of yourselves.